Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
Yes, it's Meanwhile Here on Earth, and I am, as announced, Peter Robbins. You are listening to this show or watching it on KGRA Digital Broadcasting, and if you want to subscribe, you will also have access to the zillions of other radio shows on the network. It's a very modest fee, and if you use my name, Peter, P-E-T-E-R, as your subscription code, you receive a full 30% off, whether it's for a month or a year. That said, on October 31st, UFO statistician, a friend, and a guest on this show in past, Cheryl Costa and Linda Miller Costa, a former chief librarian of the Environmental Protection Agency, began publishing a series of 50 individual state UFO statistics books with data supplied by the National UFO Reporting Center and MUFON for 19 years worth of data from 2001 to 2020. The UFO statistical sighting data in each book drills down to the county, zip code, and village level with listing of what UFO shapes were reported and what years. They completed publishing the series at the end of December, and all 50 individual state UFO statistics books are now live on Amazon and modestly priced, and a welcome contribution to the ongoing efforts toward UFO UAP disclosure. Again, that's 50 separate books for this year, one for each state, of all the UFO data imaginable. Quite an effort. You can find it by going to Amazon, and the title is UFOs and California, where to find them. UFOs in New Hampshire, where to find them. It's listed also as UFO Scholar State Statistics Series, paperback edition on Amazon. And so, tonight's guest. Dan Madsen is a writer, author, producer, publisher, editor, actor, and the founder of the official fan clubs for Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, Star Wars Insider Magazine, and founder and producer of the first Star Wars Celebration. He also played the part of Dams Denna, the Kadu handler in Star Wars Episode 1 of Phantom Menace, and These Things, among other accomplishments. From Colorado, Dan Madsen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Peter, it's wonderful to see you, and it's great to be able to join you on your show. I love it.
Yeah, we've been looking for this for a long time.
We have. We've been working on it forever, it seems like.
I almost have to laugh as I read your credits because they're absurd. It's just amazing the amount of things in the world of entertainment and quality science fiction that you've not only been involved in, but initiated. I'd like to start at the beginning and ask you where you were born, and a little bit about your family.
Well, let's see. I was born in Denver, Colorado. Shortly thereafter, moved immediately to Aurora, Colorado, which is where I'm speaking to you from right now.
Huh.
I am one of the few anymore Colorado natives. I've lived here all my life. Never lived anywhere else, Peter. Never anywhere else. It's always been right here. And Aurora is just a suburb of Denver, so to speak. So yeah, it's been I was, my parents were very middle class, wonderful, honest, hardworking people. My dad was in the sheet metal air conditioning business, and made a good living. He worked himself up to vice president of the company he worked for. My mom was a teacher's aide in the elementary school that I went to. And I had one brother who took a path of, he was very athletic, and he went off to the University of Northern Colorado and played football, and then got out and became a part of the Delta Airlines, and then from there left there and went to work for the FAA, in which he works right now. He's with the FAA. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell my background. I'm Colorado born and bred.
I'll say, as a boy, a young boy, what was your kind of entry into or introduction to the world of science fiction? Was it through reading or a movie or something else?
Well, my introduction to science fiction was really through the movies. As a small child, I was incredibly fascinated by the Planet of the Apes movies. Those movies were my thing. I built the model kits, and I had the posters on my wall, and so I was a huge Planet of the Apes fan. And so that was my introduction into the science fiction world. And I read some science fiction, but I was more a movie, television, sci-fi kid, Peter. I wasn't really as much of a literary science fiction fan, except for a handful of books, of which I'm sure you and I will be talking about here as we go on this show.
By the time you had a sense that you were going to be an adult someday, and adults did certain things, was, maybe you're 10, maybe a little older or younger, was there like a dream or a goal that you had of becoming a this or a that?
Well, something that perhaps your viewers and listeners might not realize about me, because they can't see my whole body here, but I'm a little person. I stand 4 foot 2 inches tall. So, I was always kind of viewed as different as a kid growing up. And I think that, the movies were so magical to me. I'd sit in that darkened theater and I'd watch those people up on the screen and the heroics that they would do, and watch how people would laugh and cheer for them. That, I had a desire to be an actor when I was a kid. And so I actually, as I grew into becoming a teenager and then a young man in my early 20s, I actually had an agent here in Denver, and I got many TV commercials here, most of them local. But then I did fly out to LA on a trip all by myself to look for an agent. And I went knocking on doors to a variety of different agents that I had looked up. Found one who said he would represent me as long as I made plans eventually to move to Los Angeles. And I said, that's my goal, if I can make a living out here. And so, to be an actor was probably my biggest goal. I mean, I loved being able to be somebody else on the screen and watch what those people did and how they magically came to life on that movie screen. So that was a dream of mine as a kid, was actually to be an actor.
Dan, when we grow up with something, anything that makes us different, kids, we're just insecure little human sponges. For some kids, growing up as a little person, or again, visually extremely tall, whatever it is, you can be hurt. People can come down on you. Your self-image can suffer. Mm-hmm. Did you ever experience that? And what was it? What force in your life, what constant thing kept you immune on a certain level from falling prey to that kind of behavior?
I faced it every day, literally every day of my life. I because of my size, I also had a lot of friends at school, so it was kind of this interesting back and forth of I was popular, had a lot of friends, but at the same time, those kids who didn't know me were the ones who a lot of times would make fun of me and stare and laugh and point, and um, it was a daily struggle. I mean, I can't tell you how many nights, or days I'd come home from school literally, crying, Peter, because I had no desire to be like I was. I wanted to be normal like everybody else. And it was so frustrating to me. I can remember telling my dad, I said, these people, they might see me walking down the hall at school and they'll laugh at me and giggle and kind of talk under their breath as I walk by. And I said, they just go on with their life after that day. They just go on, go to their next class, don't even think about it. But that moment for me, it absolutely destroyed my day. And so I was completely and utterly heartbroken, to be quite frank. And I'd come home and come up to my bedroom, close my door, and I would live in my world of fantasy of all these things that I loved. Comic books were another. I was a huge comic book superhero fan, collected a lot of comic books back in the day. And so it was not an easy childhood. I had two parents who were so amazing, so strong, so encouraging. They told me I could be anything I wanted to be. Always took pride in everything I did. Were always there to lift me up when I was down. I'm one of the fortunate ones. I might say here to you that I've had a difficult childhood, but it certainly wasn't difficult when it came to the fact that I won the lottery with my parents.
Yeah, I could say the same.
Mm-hmm.
At a certain point, and we've discussed it when we first met years ago in Minnesota, we've discussed it since, and tonight before going on the air, I sometimes think of life as being informed by BCAD moments. Each one of us has them. They can be moments of extraordinary happiness or tragedy, but the course of our life bends a bit on it. Sometimes it can be so mundane, though, that we have no idea that we are experiencing that moment. And one of those moments for you, which I just think is joyous in terms of its implications and how it took place, was your introduction to a television show that became iconic and a show that you had zero interest in. It was the first year the show was on. Your brother was a big fan, and he was on your case to watch an episode with him. Can That's you right. set that up for us?
Well, my brother would come home from after school, and he'd flip on the TV and he'd watch Star Trek every day. I really had no interest in Star Trek, as I Planet of the Apes and comic book superheroes. Those were my areas of interest. And I just never had a desire to sit down and watch a Star Trek rerun with him in the afternoon. This one particular day, this is when I was in junior high, and I was walking home from school, and there were two kids who were really being cruel. They were walking on the opposite side of the street, laughing at me, pointing at me, calling me shrimp, and just really terrorizing me. I don't know how else to describe it. They didn't physically harm me. Yeah. But, and I just kept trying to ignore them and keep getting home. I kept thinking, just get home, just get home. Yeah. So by the time I did get home and I walked in the front door, I had tears streaming down my cheek because I was really humiliated and really just distraught by what these kids had said and how they had treated me. And I walked in the door, and my brother, as usual, was sitting in front of the TV watching Star Trek. And I don't know what it was on that day, Peter. I don't know if maybe it was because of that incident that had just happened that I decided I just would come to sit down on the couch with him and watch whatever it was he had on the TV. Well, it was Star Trek. And I still say to this day that fate stepped in and had meant for me to watch that show on that day, because I can't personally come to any other conclusion as to why that specific episode would be on the one day that I decided I would come home and watch it with him. And this particular episode was called Plato's Stepchildren. And it dealt with a race called the Platonians who, because of what they were eating on this planet, was giving them special psychosis powers. They were able to move things. They were able to make people do what they wanted. But they had nobody to do medical work for him. And the leader got a scratch and it was becoming infected. And he was literally, being threatened that he would die. And it just so happened in this episode that they had a little person, a little person by the name of Alexander. There you go, right there. And Alexander, because of his dwarfism, wasn't able to build up these, whatever it was in their system that would allow him to have the kind of powers that they had. And so he always felt he was made fun of, and he was second to them and less than them. And as Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are on this planet, and they're sitting there, and it looks like the Platonians are not going to allow Dr. McCoy to go back to the Enterprise with them because they want to have a doctor there in case something like that happened again. Therein lies the conflict of the episode and what happens with them. But Alexander, as I sat there and I watched the show and I looked at Alexander, and strangely enough, he even looks a little bit like me. And I sat there and I watched this show and I thought, oh my God, he's just like me. He's a little person. And in this very moment where he sits there, Kirk sits next to him and he says, what's it like where you come from? And I still, to this very day, Peter, I get goosebumps.
Yeah.
And even a slight lump in my throat because I'll never forget his words. And Captain Kirk says to him, he looks him right in the eyes and he says, Alexander, where I come from, size, shape, or color makes no difference. And it was like a light bulb going off in above my head. I was like, I can't believe that there could possibly be a place where I wasn't judged by the outside of what I look like, but by the content of my character.
Yeah.
And it just blew me away. And I was immediately into the episode, watching it with great passion, and was just amazed by this little character. And after the episode kind of figures out how they're going to end it up, and Kirk and Spock and McCoy are able to go back up to the Enterprise, at the very end, the last scene, Kirk bends down and pulls out his communicator and says, Mr. Scott, I've got a little surprise for you. We're going to have a visitor. And Alexander looks up at him and smiles and knows that he's getting to go up to the Enterprise, get away from this planet, and go to the world he had dreamed of, where he's not judged by the fact that he's little. And I'm almost sometimes for a loss of words when I think about what that meant to me, because I thought to myself, if only there really was an Enterprise, if only there really was a Captain Kirk, and if only I could beam up and go into that world where I would be just like everyone else, and nobody would care if I was short, if I was little, if I looked different. It didn't matter. That was my introduction that day to Star Trek. And I was a lifelong fan from that moment on. I came home every day after school, watched it on the reruns. And I think what's amazing to me is that while I couldn't actually enter into the 23rd century world of Kirk and Spock, I found that when I went to a Star Trek convention here in Denver, my very first one, the year after that, I saw that show, that in essence, I kind of was in that world, because these people Didn't matter what I looked like. These guys are dressed as Klingons and stuff. They didn't care. They could care less that I was a little guy. We didn't judge anybody. If people were treating me like everybody else, they weren't stopping and staring and pointing and laughing. And I thought, wow, there really is a world like this, and it's called a Star Trek convention. And my world opened up at that point. I found a world that accepted me, and I took it to another level, of which I'm sure we'll talk about here, because I didn't want to just watch the show. I wanted to be a part of it somehow. I wanted to contribute to it somehow, and be associated with it somehow. And through a very kind of backdoor, unusual way, I did, and got to meet all the people who were a part of that show and became friends with many of them.
As you're speaking, I'm thinking I do want to backtrack in a moment and go back to another aspect of what we have discussed about the things that form us. But again, I have to laugh on a certain level, because I try to visualize, I think the best of us in being positive forces out in the world are good storytellers. Mm-hmm. Our stories are true, but for some people, they seem like fiction. And I'm trying to imagine the Dan in junior high school that I don't know and never met, coming in on that really lousy afternoon with these schmucky kids who are probably so insecure in themselves, the dynamic. Mm-hmm. And this moment happens. As you're sitting there watching the show, or later that night, could you have imagined in your wildest dreams that at some point in the future, this, in a way, would become this?
No, I didn't have any idea that it would become that. And, I would have hoped and dreamed about it, but never in my wildest dreams would I have ever thought that I would get to be a part of the show in a very different way, and get to become friends with William Shatner, and get to sit there with him and tell him my story and watch his eyes well up with tears, and have him tell me, "Oh my God, Dan, that's an incredible story." And so, and I'm probably one of the luckiest people I know, Peter. I really am, because not only one did I start out with just amazing parents who gave me and supported me in everything I needed, encouraged me, never told me that I couldn't accomplish whatever it was I wanted to. But I had some lucky breaks along the way. I worked hard. I was so passionate about what it was that I was trying to do. And it's funny, I didn't make it to the sets of the Star Trek movies as an actor, as I had dreamed as a kid, but I still made it to the sets of the Star Trek movies, albeit behind the scenes. And I got to know the actors better than I probably would have had I been an actor that got popped into one of those films.
Very likely. And I'm thinking also, Dan, the boy, going to see your very first Star Wars movie and being introduced to all of these wonderful characters, and thinking about, one of the heartthrobs of the entire franchise, which is R2-D2 and C-3PO. And once again, sitting there watching it and not having an idea in hell that at some point in the future, you'd be right there with Kenny Baker and living the life of an actor in a Star Wars film. I mean,
once again, as I say, I'm one of the luckiest people I know. Fate came into my life with that episode of Star Trek, and along, call it God, call it the universe, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Something has watched out for me along the way. I wasn't given anything without a fight and without hard work and effort to be put into it. But it just was. I just have had very many fortunate paths, and the other thing too, Peter, is that there was a certain opportunistic naivety about me back in those days, because I had no idea that I couldn't just call up and talk to George Lucas. It just seemed like, well, why couldn't I just call up and talk to George Lucas? Or why couldn't I just fly out and visit the set of Star Trek? And, it didn't dawn on me that I couldn't do those things. And it was because I had that opportunistic naivete that I was able to work my way through, the different paths that led me to get to them, and I developed friendships with them after that, and they have been some of the most special moments in my life now, and I have nothing but just amazing memories of working with people like Gene Roddenberry or George Lucas, as I said.
We're going to backtrack for a moment and then come back to this point after you became a fan of Star Trek and you did something absolutely outrageous that worked out just fine in our talks. 3 towering individuals who have had impacts on our life, among others, 2 writers and 1 statesman. They need no introduction.
Oh, yes.
And for Americans, this is Jules Verne. These 3 individuals have impacted on your life in a number of ways. How were you introduced to President Lincoln as a presence, and how was it that he has had such a continuing impact on your life?
Well, it might be an odd answer, but Star Trek. Abraham Lincoln was on an episode of Star Trek, if you remember. And it was called The Savage Curtain, for those Star Trek fans out there that are nerds like me and have the names of the episodes memorized. That was my first introduction to Abraham Lincoln, but it wasn't what got me into it. It was a PBS mini-series, I guess it was a mini-series you'd call it, by Ken Burns, called The Civil War.
Oh boy.
And that I was absolutely floored when I watched that.
Yeah.
That I had not really been that interested in that time period prior to that. But as I watched each episode of that, it just moved me with the amazing story that this nation went through during that time. And one person kept standing out for me was Lincoln, and how he had to maneuver to keep this whole country together through this enormous rupture, and then his compassion and his ability to still take a moment out of his day when he was dealing with literally our nation, brothers at each other's throats, to write a note to a small girl, or talk to a mother whose son was in the army and had been killed. And just every episode, suddenly I just became more and more aware of this man was an incredible guy. And that's what started it. I
must say, I'm somebody who, remembering as a kid, sometimes, we had 3 or 4 television stations, and one of them ran a weekly series of, it was a documentary called Victory at Sea. It was just made post-war. And, there was something about documentaries that I liked, but Ken Burns reset the bar. He is one of our national treasures, and
Amen.
His documentaries have had a tremendous impact on me as well. But you've kind of gone on beyond that. You have in your library a number of books on Lincoln, certainly, and ephemera and materials that most of us have never seen close up.
Right.
What a wonderful aspect of library building, of being a book lover, of being a bibliophile, of knowing history is a real living thing. and that in our own ways, we sometimes become custodians of just that. Um, the work of Mark Twain, who for me wrote the greatest novel in American history,
Yep.
and changed the way Americans saw reading and added so much to the lives of everybody that has come along since who is a reader or who has seen some of his wonderful stories transposed into film. How were you introduced to Mark Twain?
Um, Similarly to Lincoln, I with Lincoln, just to backtrack for a minute, I started buying book after book after book about Lincoln, and I just became more intrigued and more intrigued with him. And when I was at the bookstore looking for some more Lincoln books, I happened to come upon the autobiography of Mark Twain.
Oh, for God's
And I
sakes.
thought, that sounds interesting. And I always liked the way Mark Twain looked and talked. And I just thought, I'd like to learn more about Mark Twain too. So I bought that book and I devoured it. And the next thing you know, I mean, I'm becoming passionate about Mark Twain the same way I was with Lincoln. And one thing you have to realize too, Peter, is that, all my life, literally since I was a little kid, I've been a collector, and I don't know what it is in me that makes me a collector. I don't know if there's something missing that fulfills in me or what.
I think it's an extra piece of DNA in our genes or something. I've been the same since I was a boy.
Absolutely. Collecting has been my thing since I was a little kid. I collected, comic books, and I collected Star Trek and then Star Wars. So it's a part of my DNA. I can't get over it. And I fell in love with Mark Twain. My first thought was, I bought all these different books on Mark Twain, and I thought, well, man, I want to have a first edition of one of Mark Twain's books in my library.
Whoa, way to go.
And not realizing when I went and looked at the price on some of those that I couldn't afford them at the time. Once again, being a very lucky, fortunate person, I made some good money during the time that I had my own company running the fan clubs for, what are arguably the largest sci-fi franchise properties in history. And I, instead of buying, a big fancy house or buying a fancy car or whatever, I took my money and bought all kinds of memorabilia on Lincoln and Mark Twain. And I, today I have to admit, I have a pretty amazing collection of stuff, and my wife has been so good to let me display it around the house. You can actually see over here, right there. That's a turn of the century clock with Lincoln sitting there.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's just one of the items sitting on a bookshelf above an itty bitty tiny sliver of the books that I have on Lincoln. And so, yeah, our whole home is decorated in Lincoln and Twain, and she's happy to let me do that because she thinks it's neat. She loves both of those guys, and she thinks it's neat. When people come over, you see their jaws drop because they're like, oh my God, is that a letter from Abraham Lincoln on your wall? And it's
Exactly.
like, yeah, he wrote it during the Civil War. And so, yeah, we have original handwritten letters and even some of Lincoln's hair. And we have Mark Twain first editions of all of his major works. And
oh my gosh.
Campaign ribbons for Lincoln and campaign posters. And I mean, I could just go on and on and on, how all the various things. And it's taken me, all of my adult life to build this collection. And one day I hope to have it displayed somewhere. I don't know where I'll have the whole collection displayed, but, I have maybe 30% of the collection on display. The rest is all stored very safely and packed away. And occasionally I take it out, open it up, look at it and admire it. And so, yeah, collectors are a weird thing. We're all, we buy these things and a lot of times we just put them in a box and keep them safe, but you'd think you'd want to have them out and show them. I do,
No,
but I don't have the space to show everything. It's just grown too large.
I know that sensibility. There are certain objects that we don't think twice about owning.
Mm-hmm.
Kitchenware, our clothing,
Mm-hmm.
books on our shelves. Other objects that come to us or that we acquire, your sensibility is completely different. You know, you're a caretaker. You're
Yes,
simply overseeing its safety and its
that's right.
security and sharing it where appropriate. And I want to say this, I have never said this to any guest before, but Dan, you can adopt me. I would get along with every. I know your wife is fond of me. I'm sure
Yes,
your
she
children
is.
would be.
She's extremely fond of you.
There
That's
you
true.
go. I, I wouldn't ask for much in the estate, but so my, I, my
We'll have to
introduction.
talk about that later. There might be an adoption in the future.
Fair enough, and we'll just move on from that part right now. It's very personal. Obviously, a lot of people know about it now, but that's just continuing on. My introduction to Lincoln as a presence in the world when you're old enough to start having a sense that there's this thing called history. And for me, my father's father made that come alive starting when I was about 5 with walks around Lower Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
And explaining to me in great detail how different it was building by building, the way people were dressed, the vehicles that were on the road, which were horse-drawn, from when he was a boy in, say, 1900 to when I was a boy in the 1950s. And it was electrifying. That moment that I realized that history is this living thing, it really started to inform this thing called my imagination, which was fed in part by all the museums he would take me to, the theaters, shows that my grandmother would take me to. But Lincoln died of his wounds on April 15th, and that was my father's birthday. And I knew that early on. It was kind of wired together. Also, Lincoln was my father's favorite president. So I have a small bust of him, a bronze plaque on the wall, and all quite old, that were my dad's. And of course, it's Lincoln. So, he is in a place by himself. Mark Twain, I was a slow starter at reading. I'm dyslexic, and this was decades before it was noted. Most of mine is mathematical, but I had also moved from a school district where we were a year behind the one I moved to, and essentially was putting words together where other kids were putting sentences together, was brought back a grade, and everything started to make sense. My father, once I really started to read, and I was ready for adult books, the first grown-up book I ever read was Huckleberry Finn at 8 years old.
Wow.
In a very different time. And I guess the closest thing I've ever had to my dad, who meant as much to me as your dad did to you. And again, my condolences on his recent passing.
Thank you.
We carry these extraordinary men with us for the rest of our lives, and they inform it. He gave me his copy of Huckleberry Finn with his handwritten, probably 8 or 9-year-old address and signature.
What a treasure. What a treasure.
It's beat to shit. It is a very tired book. It's taped together, but it's precious. And I think the closest thing I ever had in my life to what I'll call an Atticus Finch moment was my dad explaining to me how this story had impacted on him, on his father, what an important writer Mark Twain was, what a vision of the world this was, but that there was a word that came up repeatedly throughout the book that was important to the book, but that in our society, in our times, was a terrible word to call anybody, especially, as we would have referred to then, a colored person. And my folks were very much involved in the civil rights movement. And the book absolutely changed my life in terms of dreaming big, great stories. I reread it about every 10 years. Bringing us to our last author of note here, who is Jules Verne, probably the greatest known French contributor to the world of science fiction.
Right.
And for both of us, our introduction to the work of Jules Verne came with the book 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. How were you introduced to that book, and what was its impact on you?
The impact was tremendous. I recall as a kid watching The Wonderful World of Disney on television, and I think it was the first time they were showing the movie with Kirk Douglas,
yes,
James Mason, on TV. And so my mom and dad let me stay up late, I should say, so that I could finish watching the whole movie. And I went to bed after the movie was over, and I just was dreaming of living on the Nautilus and how amazing that looked, and the story of Captain Nemo, and just the tremendous technology that went into the building of the Nautilus. And so the very next day, I asked my mom and my dad if they would take me to the bookstore. I really wanted to buy the book so I could read the book. And of course, my dad was always encouraging me to read. Always, he was a reader too, and so he was always happy to accommodate me. And they took me, and I picked up a paperback version of the novel, and I devoured it. I mean, and at that time, I read the book in a week, and that was a lot for me then. And I read the book in a week, and I my mom and dad were kind of amazed because I didn't want to go out and play. I didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to go up to my room after dinner and just sit there on my bed and read my book. And that just led to me to just absolutely adoring Jules Verne. And I bought the Classics Illustrated, the comic book.
We all did.
Oh, yeah. And, that bonded my love of comic books to the literature of Jules Verne. And so I read that probably 15 times and looked at the pictures and everything. And, we didn't have DVDs and VCRs in those days, so I couldn't just pop it in and watch the movie whenever I wanted. And then I think the next, after I finished that and I was so enamored with Jules Verne, my dad took me to the bookstore and I bought Mysterious Island because it's kind of a sequel to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And then Captain Nemo's in it. And so I just, my love of Jules Verne was slow burning. It didn't happen overnight like Star Trek or Star Wars. But boy, as an adult, I've rekindled my love for Jules Verne. And I was, as the collector in me, I finally was able to obtain a first American edition of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Not the French edition, which is the rarest, the hardest to get, but the American version. And so that holds a very special, treasured place on my bookshelf.
I have shared with you my introduction to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was also epic. I'm old enough that I was very young, and I think it was the very first movie I ever saw at a movie theater, maybe that I ever saw. My grandfather took me to Radio City to see the film.
Oh, wow.
And for anybody who loves theater spaces, it doesn't get any better than Radio City. It's high Art Deco, 5,000 seats, a half-circle proscenium arch. It's mind-blowing. And if you ever visit New York, if you don't go there to see the Rockettes or something, you can take a tour. Anyway, I digress. I saw the movie, and I was completely electrified. We went back to my grandma and grandpa's apartment. I asked for pencil and paper and watercolors, and I went to work. And when my dad learned how caught up in the film I was, he gave me a second important book, his copy from when he was about 10 years old.
Oh my gosh, I have that copy. I love the illustrations in that one.
Me too.
Wow.
This copy, it's a Scribner's. It was published in 1930 when my dad was 10. And once again, I had the pleasure of this reading experience based in a film experience, which I realize now has informed a lot of my reading life.
Mhm.
This volume is too fragile to have made scans from, but I think you'll get a kick out of this. This is one that was published in 1932 by a small house in Philadelphia. And how's that for a lurid cover?
Oh my gosh, look at a giant crab attacking him.
Plus,
oh my gosh.
that looks like a regulation issue above water rifle, which I'm guessing was good for a club in this situation. But
I love that. I actually love that. I've never seen that version before. I love it.
Here's a third one that I picked up a few years ago at one of our local book sales. No, I take that back. This is a scan, basically. No, wait. This is the one that I do have. And I thought, for some people, especially if they're not readers, especially if they're from this century or this part of this century, the idea of sitting down with a book geared for a simpler time, to ignite imaginations with maybe 4 color illustrations and maybe a dozen or so black and white illustrations, it doesn't compute in this day and age of short attention span theater. And give me some moving image somewhere.
It is.
Or
It's
let me read
alien
it,
to him.
on a screen. But the illustrator was a man named Anton Otto Fischer. And this is the end page, which
wow.
It's subdued, but it's very intense if you know the story. And Fischer was really something else. He did illustrations that were drawings, prints, paintings, all in the same book, and all informed by real skill as a draftsman. It looked to me, when I first looked at it, like 4 or 5 people had illustrated the book. And these are, look at that.
Oh my gosh, those are beautiful. I love those. And
in one picture, especially, and let's face it, these books were marketed primarily to boys. Not that it was just the way it was. But I remember as a kid looking at this image and thinking, that's a beautiful image. I wish I could make pictures like that. And that's terrifying. That's terrifying. And the text under it says, the frigate was 5 miles from us.
Oh my gosh. What year is that particular copy, Peter? Do you know?
1932.
So this was before the imagery from the film ever was around or available.
Right. The film was released, I think, in 1952 or something. So it wasn't even
53. Yeah.
There you go. It wasn't even a dream. And of course, when we think of the sequences with the giant squid, which are so, it's just
breathtaking.
When
when you see the images of the Nautilus underwater, I still think it's one of Disney's greatest movies, and it is my favorite movie. Everybody thinks, Star Wars must be your favorite. No, Star Wars is not my favorite movie. 20,000 Leagues is, and because of not only the imagery, the set design, the performances, the way it was filmed, but I'm blown away by the effects work that they did for that time period. And it's just absolutely gorgeous of that Nautilus going through the water as it goes through the tunnel down below the ocean. And, the design of Nemo's cabin and the salon. And, it just, I'm blown away by the unrivaled talent that put that particular movie together at that time. I still think it challenges so many of the new pieces today. We have all this CGI stuff now. They didn't have that then. They did everything by models, and it was truly a masterpiece that Disney made.
I was taken by that same series of feelings. And when I was older, out of pure curiosity, I drilled down to find out that the Disney Studios, which opened in about 1927 and produced cartoons and did very well with them during the war years, they produced film strips and training films for the military, as many animators did. But Disney had this idea about 1950 or 51 to maybe enter the live action world of filmmaking. Up until
That's right.
then, again, it's comic strips.
Right.
And they literally had to mortgage the entire studio and borrow. And if that film had not been the smash success that it would have been R.I.P. Walt Disney Studios 1927 to 1953. And of
That's
course, the world of entertainment changed around that. Again, Otto Anton Fischer, Too Quick, more.
Oh, I love that.
They're
You know what's
so
funny is that some of these images are almost there is a subtle similarity to the Disney film in the way it's put together and such,
yes,
and yet this
yes.
this artwork is long before the movie ever existed.
20 years. And
Yeah.
it would not surprise me. I mean, it would just make common sense that when the Disney people learned that they had a mandate and they were going to make this damn film, that researchers probably got hold of every single edition or many editions of this extraordinary novel for idea generation. And as we see here, some of it transposes perfectly well. And this rendering style for me is kind of less is more. It's so
Yeah.
elegant and so sophisticated and so powerful. And
I
we'll
love it.
end with one more image from this book, which is
Oh,
very
yeah.
different than the giant squid that,
Yes.
much bigger arms and that big old beak. We can
Yep.
see their squid has two eyes, which makes it the only squid in the world to have two eyes, but what the heck?
Yeah. It's a
Now,
monster from the deep. Yeah. No, I mean, look at that piece of art. I mean, that's incredible, actually. I'm now I'm going to have to go out and start searching for that copy because that is absolutely gorgeous.
I'll send you the scans of the covers. You should be able to locate it through
Yeah,
that.
by all means, do.
Now let's pick up at that point where you have watched this episode. You've been introduced to the actor Michael Dunn, who, by the way, for viewers, Michael Dunn was a very accomplished character actor who did a number of stage plays and a number of films. He received either the Academy Award or the Academy Award nomination for his unforgettable role in Catherine Ann Porter's Ship of Fools, which is
That's right.
a powerhouse of a film.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you are so on fire about this show called Star Trek. How did you go from watching that episode with your brother to having the insane gall to say, I think I'm going to start a Star Trek fan magazine?
Well, that part isn't so much far out because there were a lot of Star Trek fan magazines, not magazines, but fan clubs at the time. It was quite well known that there were Trekkie clubs everywhere. And they would have almost during Star Trek's peak time, there was almost a convention every weekend, Peter, in some city around the country. And in fact, in places all over the world. So it wasn't unusual to start a fan club, but it was around 1979, and the very first Star Trek movie was getting ready to come out. And I was absolutely at my wit's end, just so excited by the fact that, now we had Star Wars, but now we're going to get a Star Trek movie. And so after I went and saw that movie twice on opening day, I just thought to myself, well, what can I do that makes me different from other Star Trek fan clubs? And so I decided to start a fan club for the movie and call it Star Trek The Motion Picture Fan Club. And I would do a lot of coverage and talk about the movie itself, not ignoring the original series because that was still my passion. But that was the one thing I thought might make me a little different. And, to make a long story short, I got a job in a print shop and started learning how to make things look professional. I started typesetting my newsletters, and I would be there with my buddy that was on the press, and I would press check every issue as it would come out. It got to the point where it was looking like it was quite professional. And that was when I got a cease and desist letter from Paramount Pictures who said, hey, you're doing this without a license. And I'm like, well, I'm just a kid in my mom and dad's basement. putting this thing out. I said, it's just a passion for me. I'm not making money off this thing. And I'll never forget the head of Paramount Licensing at that time. She said to me on the phone, she said, we've been thinking about starting an official Star Trek fan club for some time. She says, you have the right amount of professionalism mixed with the right amount of fanaticism that we think you might just be the right guy to do it. And would you like to fly out to Paramount Studios and meet with us to sit down and talk about it? And one thing I failed to mention in all of this is that prior to that, I had been going for a couple of years prior to that call. I was sending my newsletter every issue. I'd send a copy to Gene Roddenberry. And he started loving it. And he would write me back and say, Dan, this is great. I love this. I love this. And so when I flew out to Paramount, Gene Roddenberry, I went over to his office and told him what I was going to do. And so after I got done with my meeting, Gene called him up and said, this is the guy. I want him to do it.
And hold that thought, Dan, because we are going to go to break, and what a perfect point to break.
Absolutely.
Peter Robbins here with my very special guest, Dan Madsen. Will be back in 4 minutes. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
It's not just a donation.
It's a warm blanket.
It's a bottle of clean water.
It's a roof and a bed.
It's knowing someone cares.
It's feeling safe.
It's a today that's better than yesterday.
Every dollar you can spare helps so much more than you can imagine. Please, donate now to help people affected by Hurricane Ian. Your support is urgently needed.
Discover the Observation Deck, a one-of-a-kind virtual event platform that takes video conferencing to the next level by using avatars to navigate a campus. There's so many areas and activities to choose from. There's a 1,000-seat auditorium, an expo hall, a nightclub, and even a beach. So come attend a conference, take a class, or hear a lecture on the incredible Observation Deck campus. Go to theobservationdk.com.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
are back. Peter Robbins here with my guest for this evening, Dan Madsen in beautiful Aurora, Colorado. We left off at a wonderfully pregnant moment. You have been invited to Los Angeles to meet Gene Roddenberry.
That's right. Getting my first letter from Gene Roddenberry was a thrill, but getting to come out and sit in his office and just chat with him as you would a friend was, something. And I got to tell Gene the story that about how I became interested in Star Trek. And he shared with me some amazing other stories of how some of the handicap fans had been so inspired by some of the technology that they showed on Star Trek. And, he was just, I can still remember him laughing and saying, he says, I don't know any other profession where I can get these wonderful feelings about having changed people's lives and made things better for them. And they paid me to do it at the same time. He was just, elated that what he did. And, I remember asking him, I said, when you sat down and started developing Star Trek, did you ever think it would become like it is? And he laughed and he says, no. He says, what kind of idiot thinks that he's going to sit down and create a phenomenon? He says, no one would ever think that. You have no idea that if what you're doing. In fact, sadly, when Gene's Star Trek came out for the first time on TV, his father went around to his neighbors knocking on the door, apologizing for his son on what his show had been. So his dad was rather embarrassed by it. But Gene was a wonderful man. I got to know him very well. He invited me out to his office many, many times. And he went to bat for me on getting the license for the Star Trek fan club, official fan club. And it, lo and behold, Peter, I don't know, a couple months after that trip, I get in the mail, a contract about this thick, telling me, you do this, you do that, all this, legalese. And I'm just a kid with I didn't even have a lawyer. I had no idea what I was signing. And for all I know, I could have signed my my first child, away. I had no idea, but I trusted. My dad looked through it. I looked through it. I didn't see anything glaring. So I signed it, and next thing you know, I'm the official Star Trek fan club. And it just grew from there on, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and till it became a full-fledged magazine with, I think at its peak, the magazine, we changed the title eventually to the Star Trek Communicator magazine. But it was like 250,000 magazines that were sent out every issue. That we had it on the newsstand. It was sold at bookstores and grocery store chains. If you joined the fan club, you got a subscription to the magazine and a really cool membership kit and access to purchase all kinds of cool exclusive Star Trek product that we produced that you couldn't find in the stores. And it was a result of that that I got the license for Star Wars, because George Lucas and his head of licensing saw what I was doing with Star Trek and said, let's call up Madsen here and see if he could do that for us too. And similarly to Paramount, I got a call and next thing I know, they've invited me out to Skywalker Ranch to sit down and have a meeting. So I've had a lot of kind of magical moments in my fanboy life.
You think?
Yeah. Yes.
You, in going through background material on you and that you've generated, one passage that you wrote stuck in my mind. I've compressed it ever so slightly, but I wanted to share it with our viewers and listeners. As I look back on my life, I've been truly blessed to have spent countless hours interviewing and getting to know these two giants of the sci-fi world, meeting Gene Roddenberry in his office at Paramount and George Lucas in his office at Skywalker Ranch many times over the years. each creator different from the other, yet both making a huge impact on the world. I had asked each of them in early interviews about the other one and their respective franchises. They both had nothing but praise for the other's creative genius. As for myself, I've never had a favorite. I never thought one was better than the other. They are different and unique in their own ways. What they share in common is a universal appeal to people all over the world and a huge influence and positive message that has changed so many lives for decades now. What a legacy. May they both live long and prosper and be a powerful force for good for decades to come. Whew.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody else in my entire world who can give that perspective from experience.
Well, I'm very fortunate because I came from it as a fan. I wasn't a reporter or a journalist that was sent out on a job to interview one of these guys. I started out genuinely, honestly, as a fan.
Okay.
Falling in love with these things.
Yeah.
And that's how it led me in a direction I never imagined, but one that I'm eternally grateful for.
And then there came into your life to some degree another person I think some of our listeners and viewers probably have heard of or maybe even seen a film or two by, named Steven Spielberg.
Yep.
How did that occur?
My hero, one of my heroes, I should say, Steven Spielberg. Well, it came as a result of my relationship with Lucasfilm. After I started the Lucasfilm fan club, which eventually became the official Star Wars fan club when they started making the prequels. The first projects on my plate to cover in the fan club magazine, number one was a movie they were having coming out, a fantasy movie called Willow, which was coming out, and shortly after that was another movie called Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And I had been a huge Indiana Jones fan. I loved Raiders of the Lost Ark and Temple of Doom. And, today I think I may even be a bigger fan of Indy than I am Star Wars. But I get a call that says they're going to send me over to Elstree Studios outside of London to spend 2 weeks on the set of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And I'm going to have carte blanche treatment and have a car pick me up from the hotel, take me to the set every day and bring me home. And they would work on setting up interviews for me with every one of the cast and crew so then I could build a library. And so that throughout the year, I wouldn't have to try to get a hold of those people after they had all left and gone their own ways. I went from one to the other and I interviewed all the cast members, most of the behind the scenes people. And I think people always ask me, because I've interviewed some, so many people and some really big names, and especially in the science fiction fantasy realm. And I tell them every time, and I mean it sincerely, I don't think I've ever met such a down-to-earth, friendly, and nice guy as Steven Spielberg. He is my all-time favorite person I've ever had to interview. He just he took the time. He was filming one of the scenes from The Last Crusade, and so they had a little area set off from it was the library scene where Harrison Ford's looking on the floor and he sees the big X, and they pull up the floor and they go down into the cavern, down there, and the rats are all down there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the scene they were filming that day, I was there. And Spielberg, it showed me what a genius he is. He would come over and there were two directors' chairs set up. And he'd come over and sit down in one, and we'd sit there and talk. I'd ask him all my questions. And I mean, he gave me his full attention. and didn't give me little one-line answers. I mean, he would then go in depth on everything I was asking him.
Wow.
And then you'd hear somebody go, "Steven, we're ready." And he'd look at me and goes, "Oh, hold on just a minute." He'd go over and go off, and they'd get the shot set up the way he liked it. And I'd hear him go, "Action." Boom, they start filming the scene, and they cut. Next thing I know, boom, 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 boom. Here comes Steven back, sit down in the chair next to me and goes, "Now, where were we?" And that went on for about an hour and a half of me just being able to ask him any question I wanted. And we chatted back and forth, and it was like talking to a family member. He was so friendly. And I even got to throw in a few questions about projects that weren't Indiana Jones related. Like I asked him some things about Close Encounters, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. Like, how did he pick Devil's Tower? And, some of the questions that I'd been dying to know as a Close Encounters fan. And those are in the interview. So if people ever find that Lucasfilm fan club with Spielberg on the cover, they'll find some really interesting questions and answers about Close Encounters that I don't think I've ever seen him answer anywhere else. He's just, he was in every movie since then. And then lo and behold, what's he do? But in 2012, he comes out with a movie about Abraham Lincoln. And I'm thinking, how is this possible that my favorite director is making a movie about my favorite person? So how can I go wrong? Spielberg directing a movie about Lincoln. It's just, once again, how did that happen?
It's almost like at times trying to imagine being you at certain moments in your life where I think I would have pinched myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming. And, this is just so far above and beyond. And again, coming back to the idea that nobody told you couldn't accomplish any of these things. Nobody told you couldn't meet these people. There is an understood, sadly, in society to a degree, and often it's informed by a parent whose dreams didn't come true. And sometimes either through frustration or malice, drumming that into a child's head, or so that they shouldn't aspire because they're going to be disappointed, as opposed to you can do anything that you want. That's
absolutely true. And that's sad. It's very sad because, there's so many young kids out there, both now and in the past, who, didn't have the blessing of two wonderful parents that gave me the confidence that I needed to build my self-esteem so that I could go out and do these things. And I really do come back to this fact that it all started with how they raised me and gave me a sense of self-worth that, I knew I could do these things if I really wanted to. And I did really want to, and I did. So I've been very blessed in my life, no question about it.
I, to use the professional term, would like to geek out a bit and ask you about certain of the individuals. For me, actors are one of the, they're in a class by themselves in terms of being professionals and living very unrealistic lives to think that you can make a living performing successfully is something a tiny percentage of actors can fill out their income taxes with pride. And you can work very hard. You can be an overnight sensation after 30 odd years of hard work. And all of a sudden, everybody in the world thinks they know you. You have, again, interfaced with actors from all of these great franchises and films. And we have a few photos here. Just wanted to get your thoughts and impressions.
George Takei. Such an amazing man. So wonderful. This was taken at his house. When I flew out to LA, he invited me over to his home, and we did this interview in his living room. Once again, I've been fortunate, Peter, in that I haven't met anybody on any of these projects that I've been so lucky to be a part of that I come away feeling disappointed, or I thought, wow, they really kind of treated me like I was, a piece of dirt or something. It's not like I was from Newsweek or Time coming to interview them. I'm from the Fan Club magazine, for crying out loud. And they gave me the time and the attention that they would have given somebody from one of the major publications. So I find that, I'm sure there are jerks in Hollywood, and there's got to be many of them out there, but I have not come across any of them in my personal one-on-one with any of the stars of these franchises. I've been really impressed all along the way. Viggo Mortensen, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings holds a very special place in my heart. That was the last official fan club I did. And it's even more special because I met my wife as a result of it. And we've been married now 21 years. She's the most special person in my life. And she was a Lord of the Rings fan. And I was doing the Lord of the Rings official fan club and magazine. And we were putting on an Oscar party for the movie, for the first movie out in Hollywood at the Hollywood Athletic Club. She happened to take a trip out with some of her girlfriends to come to the party. Everybody was dressed to the nines, and
Sure.
most people were dressed in costumes. As elves and things and such. And there were people in black tie and such. Anyway,
Sure.
Long story short, I met her at that party. We hit it off. We talked on the phone back and forth. She came out and stayed with me. And I brought her with me to the set of the Two Towers in New Zealand, where we spent 2 weeks, once again, being carte blanche treatment, going to every department, every set, interviewing every cast member, all the behind the scenes people, Peter Jackson, you name it.
We haven't even talked about him yet, and he is also
another amazing man, another amazing, just humble kind of guy. He and Spielberg have a lot in common in that respect. I got to share that with her, and then we came home and we got married.
That's great.
And 21 years later, here I am talking to you.
Your future adoptive son.
My future adopted son. Exactly right.
Viggo Mortensen is, I think he's one of the most brilliant actors working today, and versatile beyond belief. He first came to my attention because I was not so caught up in the later franchises of these marvelous projects. I think it was a film called Eastern Dreams, where he plays an Eastern European hitman. And I remember being on the edge of my seat, but you learn things about people, and working in theater in New York for years, the ones who often you hope will be the ones with real character and extraordinarily down to earth are. They're often the most successful, the most modest, and privately, in many ways, the shyest, although we confuse them often because we don't really have an alternative with the characters we see them play.
That's right. Well, Viggo, he's written poetry and such, and he had 2 books of poetry he wrote. And when I was visiting with him on the set that day, that picture was taken.
Yeah.
He met my wife and I, and he said, hold on a minute. And he went away and went to his trailer and came back and gave us 2 of his poetry books and autographed them to both of us, which are in our library now, our treasured items. So yeah, just, incredible guy. Once again, another incredible guy.
We have here, this is an introduction, of course. Tell us set the scene here.
That was taken in 1999 at the very first Star Wars Celebration convention that I created and ran in Denver, Colorado. And I'm standing next to Anthony Daniels, who was the host of the whole event, who plays C-3PO in all of the Star Wars movies. And that was us on stage at the end of the 3 days of the event, which was You could make a movie about that event, Peter. There was so much drama that happened in order for that event to happen. Since then, there's been 13, 14 Star Wars celebrations. The next one is being held this year in London.
Wow.
And we had about 30,000 people that came to Denver for that first event. And today, the events have grown to about 130,000 people that come to them. It is the event for Star Wars fans, and now Lucasfilm has really gotten involved with it, and it's become a massive thing, and it's something I'm very proud of. And that was taken on the last day of the event, and I don't know how much you want to go into it, but there were some real obstacles we had to overcome.
I would like to hear about it. This is stuff that I think for a number of us is not just fascinating, but important in how events like this can possibly come together. The logistics are very challenging, to put it mildly.
Well, I had never run an event in my life. I'd been to conventions, but I had never put on one. And Lucasfilm came to me about a year before and said, "Hey, we would really like to do a fan event before the first Star Wars prequel comes out. And we think it would be great if the fan club could do it as, event by fans for fans." And I said, we've been thinking about the same thing. It's a great idea. So I got 3 of my team. We flew out to Skywalker Ranch, sat down at a table and worked out all of the elements of what it would be. I came home and got a lot of my employees working on it. About that time, I was at the peak of my business. I had just a little over 100 employees working for me, mostly because of Star Wars, because Star Wars has always been a bigger franchise than Star Trek. So I got a lot of them working on it with me, and I worked together with Lucasfilm's team and PR crew and such. And we had put so much effort and time. I can't even begin to tell you how much time went into it. The convention center, the big Denver convention center that we had hoped to have it at, was booked on the one weekend that Lucasfilm was telling me it had to be on. So we didn't have the convention center available to us. So I went to a former Air Force base that's just not far from me called the Wings Over the Rockies. They had these massive hangars. And in these hangars, they had a museum, and they had these, fighter jets and such on display. And so I had this idea because I knew that George Lucas had thought about, the fighting between the X-Wings and TIE fighters. And it was like, World War II fighter planes, shooting at each other as they're coming down.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that might be kind of a neat marriage of the two. So I went over, I looked at the place, talked to the guys that were running the giant hangar museum, and came back, presented it to Lucasfilm. And I said, listen, we have no choice because there is no place that's suitable for a convention of this size. The convention center was rented that whole weekend by the National Rifleman Association, and so the NRA, I should say. And so we were out to lunch if we didn't use this one. So they agreed. They finally said that's a good idea. I invested into these massive, and the only way I can describe them is circus tents that were outside of the hangar. The hangar had all of the licensees showing off all their new Star Wars products, and we had a life-size X-Wing fighter in there and all kinds of goodies that people got to see. But then for the stage where we were going to bring on all the actors on stage, we had to build a massive circus tent for stage A, and then for stage B, we built another massive circus tent. And I was assured by the people that I bought them or rented them from that they were rainproof, that no water could get in them. Well, I'll get to that in a minute, because that was the second challenge that we had to face. The first challenge was that 2 weeks prior to Star Wars Celebration, after it had been advertised, everybody from all over the world, Peter, all over the world had booked their flights, their hotels, their arrangements, worked their vacations around this. And as I said, we had about 30,000 people that were coming to it.
Did you knew that number beforehand, or they just sort of showed up and overwhelmed?
We in advance, we had advance sales was about 10,000 tickets, but we knew we were going to have just a load of people, coming to the convention and buying 1-day passes, 3-day passes, and ultimately after it was all over, we were able to count up everything, and we found out that we had about 30,000 people come. But 2 weeks prior to the event, held here in Denver, the Columbine High School shooting happened. And Anthony Daniels and I were together. We were sitting in a bar, having a drink, watching the evening news. And all of a sudden up on the news comes this horrible story. This was really kind of the first of these terrible shootings that we've now become far too acquainted with on almost a monthly, weekly basis anymore, it seems like.
Was this the Littleton shootings?
That is correct.
Oh.
2 young men went into the school, opened fire, shot, and killed I don't know how many students.
More than 20.
Yeah, more than 20. Killed one of the teachers. And this was news everywhere. I mean, this was big news everywhere, this was all over the world.
One of the first big.
It was. Yeah, it was the first of all of these massive, disgusting shootings that have taken place ever since then.
Madness.
And that next day, I got a call from the head of Lucasfilm, who I'd been working with in, day out, helping to get, everything going for Celebration. And he said, we sat down and talked with George, and we all think that we should cancel the event. And I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, we're 2 weeks out. Everybody's bought tickets. Everybody's got hotels. They've all made vacation plans. I said, the actors have all been, their planes have been, reserved for them to fly in from all over the world to come to the event. And I said, I got to tell you guys, I said, as a lifelong Denverite here, I said, in 2 weeks, this city is going to need some sort of some sort of a way to get us out of this doom and gloom of just this horrible event that has just been consuming all of us. I mean, the city was in a state of depression from this happening. And Anthony Daniels and I, we were sitting in the same office, and we had my speakerphone, and we both went back and forth with the head of licensing and the head of Lucasfilm. And I still, to this day, I think George was sitting in there listening. They didn't say he was there, but I think he was there and listening. And we made as much of a argument as we could why this shouldn't be canceled, why this should continue on, why we couldn't let these two evil guys ruin this event for all these Star Wars fans all over the world, and that if there was anything this city needs as a shot in the arm, it was something good that it could talk about.
Yes.
And so they said, all right, well, let us talk with George overnight. We'll think about it. We'll get back. Let's get back together tomorrow. So immediately I got on the phone and talked to the mayor's office of Denver. And I told him what was happening. He, within an hour, faxed a letter from the mayor's office to Lucasfilm saying, please, please, please don't cancel this event.
Wow.
Denver needs this to happen. This is the shot in the arm that we need to help us get over this, horrible thing that's happened to us. And the next day, Anthony and I got together again on the phone with Lucasfilm, and they said, okay, you've convinced us. We should go forward with it. But let's do something. Let's raise money for the victims of the Columbine shooting and their families.
Good.
Let's have a place there where people can donate money. And let's have these ribbons made up that are the school colors so that everybody who walks in the door will have a ribbon put on their shirt in memory of the Columbine killing and the Columbine shootings.
Yes.
So we did. And I think we raised a little over $35,000 at the event for the victims, and we had to rush and scramble to get these little ribbons made in the Columbine's high school colors, so that we'd have them to go on everybody's shirt. And it was interesting because it was the first time that I'm aware of at any convention that people who came in costume, say as stormtroopers and such, they had to check their weapons at the door. They were not allowed to bring in their fake blasters or anything that was considered a weapon. Before they could come into the event, they had to check their weapons at the door, almost like a coat check. And we're not allowed any. Prior to that, you'd walk around any convention and there's stormtroopers walking around with their blasters and stuff, that was one of the restrictions.
Interesting.
So that
wow.
we almost didn't. It almost didn't happen. And then the last thing was on the particular weekend that we decided to have the celebration. We had the worst rainstorm in 100 years here in Denver, Colorado.
Oh my God.
And because the event wasn't under one roof in the convention center, you had to walk outside to get from the circus tents into the hangar where everything was. And there was mud everywhere, all over the place. People were standing in line outside to get into the tents to see the main event center, to see all the cast and crew that had come to the event.
Sure.
Anthony Daniels was out there for the long line of people with an umbrella going down and talking to everybody, meeting them. They got a one-on-one meeting with C-3PO that they wouldn't have gotten any other way.
Beautiful.
And met every single one of them. And these tents, which were supposed to be waterproof, leaked. And there was big puddles of water in the aisles and such that people had to walk around to sit down.
Wow.
And I just thought to myself, I thought, if I survive this, I'm never going to do this again. Because I can't, I don't know how, first it was almost canceled because of a horrible event. And second, we had to deal with this horrible rain that was the worst in 100 years. And so I just couldn't catch a break, but I still never forget. And, it's funny to this day, the fans refer to it as that. And the producer of the Star Wars prequels told me backstage, and he says, how are you holding up? And I said, I don't know. I said, I just want one day where there's not rain. And he says, I understand. But he says, I'm going to tell you right now. He says, I wouldn't change it for the world. He says, someday, he says, the fans are going to look at this as their Star Wars Woodstock. And to this day, the fans refer to it as their Star Wars Woodstock. And they all came together and battled the rain and the storms. And it didn't stop their passion to celebrate Star Wars. And so it's now considered a bit of a how do I want to say, kind of an historic event. Number one, it was the first, but a lot of people are like, oh, you were at the first celebration with the rain and the mud, and they're like, yep, I was there. It's kind of a you might consider it a badge of honor that not only did you go there, but you survived it and you had fun.
Yeah. We're going to take a look at a sampling of some of the publications that you're responsible for, but I'm not even sure how much we're going to get to regarding your other independent business ventures. You have had company after company, which you've established and run successfully. And you are a remarkable business success in so many respects. Thinking about the kid in the basement and the adult before us right now, did you ever at some point say, I think I need a business course or accounting or something to help me do what I'm doing?
I was lucky because I was able to build my business over a course of time. I didn't start a business and have it up and running yesterday, or I mean tomorrow. I had time to slowly grow it over time.
Okay.
But, I knew I couldn't do everything, and I knew I wasn't good at everything. So what I did was hire smart people that did know how to do those things. And they did the things that I couldn't do very well. I ran the business and did a lot of the interviews for the magazines, and I was the glue that kept the company together, and gave encouragement to all the different divisions of the company, how they were working. And but for me, the true the true secret to my success is hiring good people to do things that I was not good at.
Yeah.
And they have every bit as much of a part in the success of that business throughout its years of being around. And I still, to this day, Peter, I can't tell you, my wife marvels at it because I still live here in the place that I've lived all my life, but also in the same city where I ran the whole business. And I can't tell you how many people I bump into and like, oh, I used to work for you. That's the best job I ever had. That's the best job I ever had. And they loved it because I tried to hire fans, people who loved these things. I used to have a young guy come to work in his Captain Kirk uniform, and he was on the phones. He was one of our people that would take the orders over the phone for product, Star Trek and Star Wars product. And he'd come dressed every day in his Star Trek uniform, and he was like, "What other job can I come in, can I do that at?" So yeah.
Let's take a look at some of these publications.
Okay.
Great photo.
That's from the episode last year of Young Sheldon. And lo and behold, I'm watching Young Sheldon, and on it comes, the publications that influenced me the most as a child, and boom, Star Trek Fan Club magazine, and there's Young Sheldon holding up that magazine going, "Oh my God, Mom, DeForest Kelly's favorite episode was so-and-so." And she goes, "That's nice." That's the second time. Twice the Fan Club magazine has appeared on Young Sheldon. So they're doing their homework on that show, because at the time he was a kid and was loving Star Trek, that's when I was doing the Fan Club magazine.
Gosh. And a gentleman who we all love.
That's the Lucasfilm Fan Club magazine that featured the Harrison Ford interview I did when I was over in the UK for The Last Crusade. And that was such a fun interview to do. And he's such a low, it's just, how do I want to describe him? Just, he's friendly, but he's just, he's real mellow. And, he talks like that in that deep voice, and when I was doing the interview with him in his dressing room, he was sitting there across the table from me, and he had a whole bowl of walnuts, and he was cracking the walnuts and eating them as we would do our interview, and he kept asking me, "Sure you don't want a walnut?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I'm good, but thank you though," And so the whole interview, you don't know it in the printed version, but on the tape, you can hear him cracking walnuts the whole time that we're sitting there talking back and forth.
I love it. In learning some things about Harrison Ford, I worked as a journeyman carpenter in my 20s and did a lot of work in the so-called Soho building boom, that area of lower Manhattan where so many old factory buildings were renovated into lofts and galleries and nice residences and things. And Ford made his living as a carpenter for quite a number of years.
That's
and
right.
Had a small accident, and later in life he could have certainly afforded to do cosmetic surgery, but he has a scar there incurred on a carpentry job, which I thought, why not? Good for you. Is also something that is so incredibly likable about this bigger than life character that he has inhabited for so many years for so many of us. And growing up in an American Jewish family, I loved the reoccurring theme of beating the shit out of Nazis. And of course,
Yes. Yes.
Working opposite Sean Connery was just absolutely joyous for a lot of us. But the initial film, I mean, the films that our parents and grandparents to a degree grew up with, the adventure sequels, the daring do, and then that whole notion of a tremendously romanticized idea about explorers. And again, it edges into obviously a certain amount of colonialism, and this object will be very safe in our museum because we are white Westerners, and you people here, you don't know enough about anything to have your own object here, so which is turning around quite sensationally now. Anything about, how can I say, the whole Indiana Jones character. And, for a lot of people, they're saying, oh, he's kind of long in the tooth now, and I don't know about another film. My feeling is keep him going as long as he's alive, as long as it's, effective and the stories make sense and they're appropriate for the age of the character. Anything that you know about the new film that you can share with us that we'll be seeing later this year?
Yeah, well, the trailer just came out 3 weeks ago, a month ago, something like that, for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny coming out this year. This is the last one, and Ford's already said this is his last Indiana Jones movie. And I think they're going out with a blast, because this movie, everything I know about it, everything I've seen about it, everything others have told me about it, is that it harkens back to that very first Raiders of the Lost Ark, playful romp, and we got Nazis back again, and they're the bad guys. And I really think that they're going to go out with a bang this time. I think this is the movie that a lot of people had hoped that the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull would be.
Yes.
But was not. This one is going to make up for that, and I think that fans are going to, anybody who's a fan of Indiana Jones, I think will feel fulfilled after they see the Dial of Destiny.
The first Indiana Jones film appeared in 1987. Am I correct there, or is it?
I think it was 1981.
That early?
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. By
the way, Peter, you mentioned the scar that he got. They actually showed how he got that in the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. At the beginning of the movie, when you see a young Indy, played by River Phoenix, and he falls into a circus train car, and there's a lion there, and he looks up on the wall and he sees a bullwhip, and he grabs that bullwhip and he starts smashing it at the lion, because the lion's coming at him, and as he pulls it back, goes, shh, and he goes, and you see the blood, and it's right there. And so they even tell you how he got that scar in one of the movies.
Yes, very poignant sequence with the late River Phoenix.
Absolutely.
A beautiful flashback. We now go to
the man
Mr.
himself.
Lucas himself.
Yep. That picture was taken on the set of Willow. But I interviewed George many times, and every time I interviewed him, I'd fly out to Skywalker Ranch in his beautiful, beautiful office. It looks like something from the turn of the century. It's all mahogany. It's got, kind of, how do I want to say it? They've got the kind of Tiffany lamps that he loves. He's such a man of design and quality. I really love his style. And on the wall are not copies, but original paintings from Maxfield Parrish, who he loves, Norman Rockwell, whom he loves. Original paintings on all the walls, and he's got just this most luxurious, beautiful office that I could have lived there. His style is one that I really try to emulate, because I love everything he does with the look of Skywalker Ranch. And of course, Steven Spielberg on the set of The Last Crusade. We talked about my time with him on the set, And I got Christmas cards from him and George. I still do. So it's two guys that, and I've said to people, I said, of all the people I've interviewed, and there are many, many big name people, I thought, if there's one person who has a right to be kind of stuck up and conceited because he's so good, it would be Steven Spielberg. And he is so exactly the opposite of that. It's like, you just met some guy on the street and you want to talk to him, and he sits down and says, sure, what do you want to know? And you sit down and there's not an ounce of ego that I could see in him at all. Yeah. Just he was really, and still remains, my favorite person that I have ever interviewed.
His filmography as a maniac film lover from childhood is remarkable in how diverse it is, from comedies to tragedies to almost documentary level films to character studies to great adventures to small adventures. I don't think I've ever seen a film of his that has not held my attention or that I keep coming back to. When he made Schindler's List, a lot of us were caught off guard. He is certainly somebody who's never shied away from his Jewish heritage, but to take this very complex man, brilliantly played by Liam Neeson, a wonderful actor and a very extraordinarily decent person, I was breathtaken. I thought, I wish my mom was still alive to see this. It is a Yiddish word called mitzvah, a good deed. Certain cultural acts resonate through history, and they continue to do good deeds as they go. Even just one, as far as I'm concerned, that makes people laugh.
Mm-hmm.
No higher calling.
No, really not. And there's nothing he can't do. I think he said now he wants to try to tackle a Western at some point. So I guess we'll find out. We'll see how he does with that.
Works for me. We're going to need a bigger boat.
Yeah.
Well, 100th issue.
Yes, and there was 50 more to come after that one. But that one was special for me because I interviewed all the various captains of Star Trek. And they were all in one issue. And that was at a time, I think, when Deep Space Nine was kind of the new show on TV. And so everybody was intrigued and excited about Deep Space Nine. And but yeah, that was an accomplishment for me that I had somebody took a copy of the cover of that and matted and framed it in a gold frame and everything for me. And for most of the time that I had my office, I had that on the wall because that was to get to the point where I did 100 magazines, and many of them, when I had maybe 2 or 3 people helping me with it. Not in the later years where I had a whole crew of people, and my designer was in Montreal and our printer was in Wisconsin and my editor was in Aurora with me. And so, it was made by people all over the world.
Dan, you've reminded me, and this is a tiny geek detail. I was very moved by the Star Trek, what's the term again, for the very first episode? You
mean the pilot?
Yeah, the pilot. It was a 2-part, and it had really an unforgettable plot. And the actor who played the first commander, Captain Christopher Pike was the name of the character. I don't remember the name of the actor, but by chance, were you able to interface with him anywhere along the line?
I was not. That was Jeffrey Hunter. Jeffrey Hunter died long before I ever started doing the fan club. He was in a lot of movies back in the day. He was quite the rising leading man. Yeah. He was in I'm trying to think which John Wayne movie he was in. It was just a brilliant movie. One with Natalie Wagner, John Ford movie.
Right, The Searchers. That's right.
Yeah, The Searchers.
One of the greatest westerns of all time.
Absolutely. So yeah, I know. Unfortunately, he died before I ever started working on it. Although I am connected and do know his son, and his son is very proud of his dad's accomplishments, and he'll post many things about his dad. And I'm sorry I never got to meet him, nor did I ever get to meet Michael Dunn. Michael Dunn passed away many, many, many years before I ever became even interested in Star Trek. So there are people that I would have loved to have met, but never got the opportunity.
Well, the plot of that was visionary and incredibly emotional, I thought. To digress for a moment, just the idea of somebody trapped in their body, literally, and this opportunity to live in a world that some would call illusion, but for you is more real than anything could possibly be. Also, the very charismatic actress that played opposite him in other Star Trek episodes, who passed just last year, I forget her name, but she also was brilliant and very moving.
She really was. That was a powerful episode. I agree with you. Yeah.
And I think it will speak to people in the future continually. Again, as we move forward in ways that folks who are dealing with severe physical problems can see technology help them with an alternative.
Yeah, I agree, Peter. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. Yes, Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker himself, such a friendly, outgoing, accessible young man. Well, he's not so much young now, but but the fans just love him, and he loves the fans because he collects comic books and sci-fi stuff, and he's a big sci-fi fan himself, and he loves, he's the voice of the Joker on some of the older Batman animated shows, and he's just so accessible that you wouldn't even know that he's a big star, because he just is happy to mingle with all of the fans wherever he is.
Dan, believe it or not, we are almost out of time, and we could just keep going on and on. This has been really special for me, and I hope you consider coming back.
Of course, absolutely, Peter.
That would be great. Where can folks go to find out what you're up to or what you're doing? Do you have a set website, or is there a location people should head for to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a website, but I have. They can find me on Twitter at the Dan Madsen. I'm also on Facebook under Dan Madsen. I also have an Instagram account, Madsen8973, and I post things daily. At least I try to. Not only memories of all the things I've worked on, but images from a variety of all the franchises that I have a finger in. And I'm in the process of working on my memoirs that I hope to have completed this year, which is I think is going to be very interesting, because there's a lot of things I've never talked about that will be in that memoir that fans will love reading about, these things that they're all so passionate about. And it crosses paths across some of the biggest franchises of all time.
When it's ready, let me know, and you'll come roaring back for that one.
I guarantee it. I will.
Our time has flown. I love you, my brother. A big hug. Love to death. And this is Peter Robbins. We've been spending the last 2 hours with Dan Madsen. Join us again next week. Stay well, fight for what you believe in, and be kind to each other.
Live long and prosper.